I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain. We bag enough. I, I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain. We bag enough. Poppin' tan model BG couldn't brag 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 enough. I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the Horizon Roundtable. I am your fill-in co-host, Jim Sarrow. Back with me one more time is Mr. Kula, the new Gregory Kula. Greg, thanks for joining us again. How did this week of Horizon League basketball treat you?
Well, specifically, Cleveland State is making me breathe very heavily right now after just finishing up watching their game against Milwaukee. But overall, I think it was a pretty crazy week. A lot of guys out with injuries, but a lot of teams kind of making surges in the standings.
Yeah, it definitely was a big week. I think we're going to talk about the big geographic news that happened this week, and that is the state of Ohio, and Columbus is now the new capital of Wisconsin. Cleveland State and Wright State came to Wisconsin and apparently annexed Wisconsin into Ohio because they combined to go 4-0 in the state. Let's start with Wright State. They're at the top of the pile. They went on the road. They needed 2 wins. They got 2 wins. What did you see from Wright State this week?
A pretty same thing that we've been seeing all season. You know, they're not going to shoot a lot of threes. They're going to beat you up inside. They're going to get scoring across the board. Um, nothing too crazy. One thing that really shot out to me against Milwaukee was they were 56.5% at the line, which was absolutely horrible. I think that's why the game was a little bit closer than maybe it should have been. But they only gave up 26 points in the first half against Milwaukee, 28 points in the first half against Green Bay. They're just they're gonna really play well inside, and they're not gonna let you score.
Yeah, against the Phoenix in a win, an 8-point win, they jumped out to an early lead, and then Green Bay was just fighting uphill, and they got the lead down to 4 and had the ball in the second half because there was a flagrant foul called on Amarbe, and LeBron Thomas made two free throws, and they got the ball. Got a really good look with Preston Ringer, and unfortunately, it didn't go down. And then from there, Green Bay just played even again. But what really stood out to me about Wright State, watching them, is that they're just a team they're not going to beat themselves. Against Green Bay played a flawless, not flawless, but played a really good game. Green Bay's splits are good enough to win a game, and yet Green Bay turned the ball over 10 times, which isn't bad. Wright State only 5 times. Like, Wright State's not beating themselves. And then they just have a lot of strength and length and athletic ability. And you had Pickett coming on today. He had a monster game against the Phoenix. I mean, he just ate him up. He had 21 and 8, I think. 21 and 8 on 8 of 11 shooting. And Green Bay, went to bigger guys to try to slow him down and couldn't. And so it just really set the tone for they had that big physical presence. Against Milwaukee, they didn't shoot, like you pointed out, they didn't shoot from the free throw line very well, and yet they were aided in great 3-point defense. Milwaukee was 5 of 25 and hit 2 of them in the last 2 minutes of the game. So at one point they were 3 of 23 shooting threes. And so Wright State just figures out a way to win, and very, very impressive team. But while we're talking about the state of Ohio, I think we need to talk about the Cleveland State Vikings, because they've really got their act together now. So they were struggling, and some of the things that were hurting them are still there, but they're winning basketball games. Greg, what's going on with the Vikes if they're on a little bit of a mini hot streak here?
They're finally healthy. Today, you had everybody in the lineup again. You have Priest Ryan back, who was injured for a little bit, and obviously last 2 games you've had Josiah Harris back, who he is such an important part to the defense and the offense. And the fact that he's able to throw up some threes and make them from the corner or the top is crazy. Every time he does it, I get a little nervous, but then I remember that it's him and it's not some other big. And they're just getting scoring from everybody. The last couple of games, they've got Emery scoring double figures. I know he's a guy from Wisconsin and had 2 good games in Wisconsin. But then they've got Nessa, who's just been having a great year. Lipscomb can't miss from 3 right now, and it's just the offense is clicking on every cylinder, and then their defense has really. I know they gave up 88 points today and 82 points against Green Bay, but their defense has come a long way from the beginning of the season, where they're in that sometimes people call like a 1-3-1, or I think it's more of a 2-2-3, or maybe like a 2-2-1 or something. But they're getting there a lot faster on the um on the wings, and they're not allowing a lot of guys to cut anymore, and it's really shut down a lot more teams than they did at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I thought when I saw Cleveland State on Friday night when they went to the Rush Center and won by 7, and that was a game they had a 16-point lead at one point, and again, it got a little tight at the end. It was down to 3, and honestly, Green Bay got it down to 3, and the look on Nessa's face, and I forget who was inbounding the ball at the time with him, but they looked like, oh man, here we go again. And yet they came right down, and Lipscomb got a corner 3, and then they scored again on a easy basket right after that. So it was a quick 5-0 run, and the lead went back to 8, and then they had confidence again. But they were just a tremendous shooting team on Friday night. They were 16 of 29 from 3, and quite frankly, they were actually 17 of 30. But Harris hit that 1-3 with his toe on the line when he got an and one. So they really just shot lights out. And the really cool thing about the way that they were playing, they had on Friday night against the Phoenix, they had 20 assists on 26 made baskets. Their actions that they run were just, for a team like Green Bay, it's not quite as long and not quite as athletic. It's just really hard to guard. Like, Green Bay, whether it's O'Hara or Reedinger, they would be shooting the gap on the handoff action, on the point over action, and yet they couldn't do it every time. They just couldn't. And so then you'd have to help a little bit to stop the dribble, and they would just sling that rock to the other side, and Lipscomb or Foster Wonders would bury a 3. It was really pretty looking basketball. It's simple basketball, but pretty basketball from Cleveland State. Super hard to guard. So it's just one of those things. You don't have to be complicated to be good, and they're really hitting on all cylinders. And against the Phoenix, they had 5 dudes with 15 points or more. I mean, you're going to win a lot of basketball games when you have that kind of scoring. And their defense, while not great, wasn't terrible anymore. So that's a big change for the Vikings, and a big week for the state of Ohio as they came to Wisconsin and go 4-0. Greg, I think we need to go to the other team that went 2-0 this week, and they needed it because with Wright State getting 2 wins, Oakland needed to get a pair of wins, and they did. They went to Fort Wayne to start out the week and got a 74-65 win. What did you see from the Golden Grizzlies?
Well, they're obviously dealing with a couple injuries right now. Isaac Garrett was out, and he's averaging 7.5 rebounds. But they still found a way to get 2 guys with 11 rebounds that day against Purdue Fort Wayne, and the whole season they've been getting scoring from everybody. I mean, they got scoring up and down in that game, and they just absolutely dominated on the boards. And the Oakland only had 10 fouls in the entire game, which I find crazy in a NCAA game. So they're just a very smart team and well-rounded team. And I said it the first time I was on the podcast, and Campy found the guys that he wants to play, and it's working. They really, against Purdue Fort Wayne, just everyone that needed to play well played well. And then against Northern Kentucky, same kind of thing. I mean, you had scoring up and down, and they were. Wasn't someone else out today, or was it just? It might have just been Garrett again. I think he was just out again today.
Yeah, they have 7-man rotation.
Yeah. So, but I mean, same exact stats every time you look. Same thing with them as with Wright State the whole year. They're not going to shoot threes very well. They're not going to shoot very many threes. They only took 18 today, but they're just going to play you good inside.
So it's interesting. You think about Oakland against now Fort Wayne again, doesn't have the most bulk and beef down low, but Oakland without Isaac Garrett. I mean, so you're talking like a main level, top 10 player in the Horizon League, more than likely. They're still plus 12 on the glass, and they were plus 16 points in the paint. So the embarrassment of riches that Oakland has now, granted, they're down to 7 guys. So if there's not a ton of wiggle room before you're into, UWM territory in terms of the injury situation, but they're still getting it done with the dudes that they have. And today against Northern Kentucky, They were +9 on the glass. Now that helped that LJ Wells didn't play, but they didn't shoot very well. Their shooting splits were 42, 28, and 71. But what they got a lot of help in a 11-point win over Northern Kentucky. They had 9 more free throws made than Northern Kentucky. And so, I know that some coaches around the league probably get a little frustrated that Oakland does not commit fouls. A lot of that's based out of the zone defense that they have, and like they just have a big guy sitting back in the paint, and he doesn't have to come out unless somebody's really shooting hot. So they're not really committing a lot of fouls because they don't need to be aggressive, guarding the perimeter because they've got a big guy sitting in the paint. But they're getting to the line. I think Brody Robinson has more free throw attempts than anybody in the league, and they're getting to the line and they're making their free throws in these tight games. And so that's enough for them to win because they were +10 on free throws at Fort Wayne. They were +9 against Northern Kentucky, and they won those games by 9 and 11 respectively. So the work was done at the line, even though the game wasn't exactly pretty in all aspects for the Golden Grizzlies. But mega wins, no matter how they did it. Mega wins because they needed them to keep their conference regular season championship hopes alive. Well, when you look around, there were some other teams that had opportunities and didn't get what they needed from the week. I'm going to go over to the Fort Wayne. They got a split. As we talked about, they lost at home versus Oakland. And then they won on Saturday against Robert Morris. So they went 1-1 on their homestand. And with what happened to Green Bay and beating Robert Morris, who's right in the mix there, and what happened in Northern Kentucky, they got some breathing room in the standings, but they didn't necessarily get the work done that they needed for a regular season conference championship. What say you about the Mastodons?
They're a little confounding, right? Obviously going up against Oakland is going to be a little bit tougher of a challenge than anybody else right now. But yeah, I know we just talked about the fouls with Oakland, but when you only get 7 foul shots against Oakland and you only make 4, I don't think it's a great day at the line. And then on top of that, even though they won against Robert Morris, they were out rebounded by 10. And it's just that there were a lot of stats that they really lost against Robert Morris, even though they ended up winning by 12. They just shot a little better from 3 than Robert Morris did, and honestly, they also had that's perfect. They had 11 points more off of turnovers. So that right there, I think, kind of won them the game. But the actual half-court offense, half-court defense is, I think, just not as strong as some other teams right now.
It's interesting. Yeah, well, and in this particular weekend, DeAndre Craig was the guy on Saturday against Robert Morris. He was 7 of 9 from the floor, hit for 19. He came down in the second half at a mega moment, and he had a right-hand punch dribble and then dragged it through his legs and hit a pull-up 3. And I was like, damn, that's a pro move right there. Like, that was a big-time shot. Like most guys on the horizon aren't going to hit a punch drag and then into a 3-pointer. And I mean, he was just cooking with gas, and he kind of carried the way on a super efficient day for them. I mean, they shot, to your point, against the Colonials, they shot well, 10 of 22 from 3, and where Robert Morris was like 9 of 29, like just really, really not good, and had a ton of turnovers. So even though Robert Morris crushed them on the glass, they turned the ball over, they shot poorly, they didn't do anything with those opportunities. Whereas Fort Wayne just kind of maximized what they had. They didn't play great, but they maximized what they had in that particular game. But they needed to get a win. It would have been great for them to get 2, but they needed to at least get a split at home, and they did that to kind of keep things interesting at the top of the standings. It was announced this week they are going to play in February at Green Bay on ESPN2. So while that game is not that looming as important for the Phoenix after a very tough homestand, it is definitely a big one for the Mastodons to try to get revenge on national TV. I'm going to bounce over to a team we don't get to talk about much in a favorable light, but they did have a 1-0 week. So I do want to talk about the Penguins of Youngstown State. They played at home. They had IU Indy, and they won the game 85-76. What did you notice from the Penguins that helped them get a home win in their only appearance this week?
I mean, you probably can point to the fact that they were who they were playing. Probably was the easiest way, but I mean, they put up 51 points in the second half. That was quite impressive, no matter who you're playing. But I mean, Chris Carroll's been having a great season. He's number four in the league with over 19 points a game. And then Dawkins also put up 18 points. They both had 18 points in that game. And Dawkins added in, he almost had a triple double. Almost, I'll say, but he had 18 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, and only one turnover. So he really put together probably his most complete game of the season. Um, and they only had 14 fouls, and IU Indy's going to foul a lot with that press. They had 22, and Youngstown made 25 out of 29 of their free throws, and that kind of just stretched the lead a little bit, just enough. It's especially considering IU Indy didn't even shoot a free throw in the first half. Um, it was just um, a bad team going up against a slightly worse team, I think, and beating them a little bit at the line.
And honestly, probably more than a little bit at the line. If you think about it, they were plus 16 at the line. So IU Indy was 9 of 10, but Youngstown was 25 of 29 from the line. So this is a 9-point game where they're minus 16 at the or plus 16. I mean, Youngstown's plus 16 at the free throw line. But regardless about who you're playing, you got to get the victory, and they did that. I mean, we've seen other teams, lose. We saw Oakland lose to IU Indy. We've seen, Wright State lose to Cleveland State before they kind of figured or as they were figuring themselves out. So we saw Youngstown. I believe Youngstown lost. Didn't Youngstown lose to Cleveland State in the middle of all this? Yep.
Yep.
So. Yep. Yes, they maybe got the right opponent at the right time, but they handled their business when they needed to. Speaking of handling their business, Detroit Mercy had a game this week, singular. They played Northern Kentucky at home. They get a 90-77 victory. I see a few things that stand out to me in this one. The one that I'm probably most impressed, not impressed is probably the wrong word, but TJ Nadeau didn't have any points in this game, and they still put up 90. What jumps out to you about the Titans' victory over the Norse?
I mean, I think it doesn't matter if Nadeau had 0 points when Tyler Spratt came out and dropped 28. So, yeah, I mean, Spratt was incredible. He was 8 for 10 from three. That was he had it in. He had 6 rebounds, 6 assists. He had no turnovers. He had an absolutely amazing game. He's 18th right now in scoring in the league in conference play. And then they've got 2 top 10 rebounders right now as well. They've really got the pieces, I think. It's just not been, all meshing together at the same time. But anytime you're going to have a guy go 8 from 10, that's going to be a good head start. And overall, as a team, they went 12 for 20 for 60% from three. So pretty great from deep. But I mean, he just went absolutely crazy. Lovejoy added in 24. I'm not sure. It might be his season high. He might. But yeah, the two of them kind of just took over and beat a Northern Kentucky team that had a guy go for 33.
Yeah, it's with Detroit Mercy. So you talk about Spratt going well. Legend Jeter had another quiet good game. So you talk about they have the pieces. They have more than just Lovejoy. Yeah, more than just Lovejoy and Nadeau. They've had guys kind of coming and going in terms of throughout the year. We had a few of the other freshmen have nice games. Cotton had a nice game in this game. So, or excuse me, not Cotton, Stone, I think had a good game in this one. So they're just, if they can get all these guys kind of humming at the same time, that could be a really good sign. But the most important thing for Detroit Mercy is that they had lost 2 at home. They needed this one. They needed this one really badly, and they got it. So that was really great for them. Conversely, Northern Kentucky in this game, I think that Cale Robinson need to fire up the old the Limp Bizkit song from way back in the day. I know we don't get a lot of Limp Bizkit's references here, but I think it's just one of those days where you don't want to wake up. Everything is effed. Everything sucks. He was 0 for the day in that game. From where did he shoot? for the
0
game.
for
He was
14.
0 for 14, 0 for 8 from deep. Yeah, that's definitely one of those days and everything sucks. And over the team, they were 10 of 37 on three. So you take out his 8, and the team made 10 of 29, which isn't great, but it's not, it's good enough to probably win a game. So they lost by 13 in a day where one of their mainline players, frontline players, definitely did not, deliver for them. And then against Oakland on Sunday, they lose, and they just had another difficult day shooting the ball. So you're not going to, if I remember correctly. Do you have the box score on that one handy, Greg?
I do, yeah. From three, they went 9 for 40 against Oakland. And O'Day went 0 for 7. Robinson actually went 4 for 11. But yeah, just another, just two tough shooting days in a row. Yeah.
Yeah, I had written down 33 and 22, and I thought 33 and 22. They should have lost by a lot more than 11 with that kind of shooting. But yeah, that just a weekend to forget. In Northern Kentucky, they're right now it's a little bit of a jumbled mess again in the middle of the league because you got Robert Morris got a split, Green Bay lost 2, Northern Kentucky lost 2. So you've got these teams really battling to try to get a home court game in the first round of the Horizon League tournament, but not what the Norse needed this weekend. Conversely, Robert Morris, they got a split. They also had the benefit, I guess you could say, of getting IU Indy at home in a game where they just shot really well. Their splits were 49, 50, and 88. That's going to win you a lot of games. And in this one, they won by 16. Anything else stand out for you against the Jaguars when the Colonials played to get their one win of the week?
Every time before we do this, look through like the top 10, top 15 of rebounding points per game, and there's a they're just everyone from Robert Morris is on there. I mean, you've got points per guys leading in 3 guys in rebound. Let's try that again. 2 guys in rebounding, 2 guys in points per game. They're kind of splattered all over the leaderboard right now for the conference, and every day you kind of get a different guy getting bigger stats. And Chidicunas had 9 and 11. He had 7 offensive rebounds against IU Indy. I know IU Indy doesn't have a lot of height, but that's still pretty crazy. And they only gave up 25 points to IU Indy in the second half, which that's amazing.
Hidegudis, he's coming off the bench now. So
Yes.
not that he lost a starting role, but his role has adjusted as their season has moved on, and he's a force on the glass, but he's not necessarily the best finisher. And then when he gets to the free throw line, he's still really struggling at the free throw line. So Robert Morris is just a tough team to figure out because when they're really going, they look good. IU Indy, 50% of their threes. Then they go, 2 days later against Fort Wayne, and they hit 31% of their threes and take a whole bunch of them and turn the ball over like crazy. Because they did a better job of not turning it over against IU Indy. Like when they lost to IU Indy in overtime at the what do they call that place where the Jaguars play? It's got a name, right? Oh my God, not important.
The
The little gym that they play in. It's it's not the Pound or something like that, but it's something along those lines. Anyway, the Jungle. That's what it is. The
Oh
Jungle.
yeah,
They
yeah.
lost it. They lost at the Jungle. They turned the ball over left and right. They did a better job against IU Indy, but then they go to Fort Wayne, who's not nearly, I mean, Fort Wayne's attempting to get turnovers, but not in the same, balls out full court press that IU Indy is using, and they turned the ball over 16 times. So just a very difficult team to figure out and put your finger on and say, okay, here's what you're going to get from Robert Morris. You're getting rebounding, but after that, you don't know what you're getting with the Colonials, and that's kind of reflected in a split week. In a week where they kind of needed a sweep, they get a split.
And not to discount the win against IU Indy, but IU Indy's playing without D'Agostino. So, that's obviously a big scoring threat that they didn't have to contend with.
Yeah, that's. Do we have any update on how long he's going to be out? Obviously, he's a frontline scorer in this league, one of the top scorers in the league. Do we know what he's out with and how long he might be down for?
I have not seen an update on him, but I will check that while we continue to talk and hopefully have an answer for you.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to the state of Wisconsin. It was a very difficult week for both teams. You had close games, entertaining basketball games in their own ways. Falling behind, coming back, but in the end, like at the end of the game, when it mattered, both games were entertaining. But we'll start with the Panthers. They lose to Wright State. They are playing a slower brand of basketball. They had fewer possessions in that game than they've had recently. However, that's kind of a function of like they don't have a ton of people available to play. They got a great game on Friday night from Amar Aguilar. He was 7 of 13 for 19 points. They were even on the glass with Wright State. So like they're right there, even with everything that's up against them. They're right there, and couldn't get over the hump and seal the deal against the Raiders. And then today, in what was basically a comedy of errors for both teams in the last like 30 seconds of the game against Cleveland State, Josiah Harris gets called for a flagrant foul, and at the time that this is called, he gets a ball and he swings his elbow and comes right across Josh Dixon's face. He gets called for flagrant. So Cleveland State is up 5, gives the ball back to Milwaukee, who makes 2 free throws, and then Josh Dixon makes how would you describe that 3 that he made? Like a split leg prayer that swished would be a good description. What do you think about that one that went in?
It looked a little bit like I was watching some kind of AI video that they had forgotten to put in a couple of the frames, and somehow they decided that the ball was going to go in. I don't know how it went in. It was crazy. And then I can't believe that they fouled right after.
Yes, and then they have a little bit of a brain lock. I mean, obviously, I don't know what's been communicated to the players. And you hate to see when a player has something like that happen. Like if Chandler Jackson, in this case, commits a foul 70 feet from the hoop when Cleveland State's in the double bonus in a tied ball game. The background on the TV feed, the fans were just all over the officials about, let them play and go back to the WEAC. That was a foul. Like, you have to call that foul. That's a foul. Like, you can't not call that foul. And I'm not even saying that because I don't like, I don't want people to think it's like, because I'm, a Green Bay fan and it's Milwaukee. Like, that's a foul. Like, it's not a good foul, but it's a foul. And so, you had Cleveland State doing their best to hand Milwaukee an opportunity. And then Milwaukee, immediately upon tying the game, hands it right back. So what a wild finish. But yeah, for Milwaukee, they're right there. They just couldn't seal the deal against either of these teams. And it's got to be super frustrating for the guys that are playing and super frustrating for Coach Lundy that they had a tough week. But they seem to be still in good spirits. It would be easy for them to just have given up at this point, and they are not. So I got to respect that from the Panthers. Anything else that, you watched the whole game today against the Panthers? I did not. I was watching the Green Bay game. I turned it on in the second half. Did you see anything from Milwaukee that's kind of worth talking about?
Nothing too specific. I just think that for a team that does have as many injuries as they do, 2 top line players, they looked pretty cohesive today. And, they're just not that great shooting from outside, apparently, unless there's 2 seconds left in the game. But they look better than I would expect with all these injuries, and they're definitely playing the style of basketball for the team that they're playing. I don't think they played a very similar game to the game that they played against Wright State today. They definitely played a much quicker game because Cleveland State plays a quicker game. But yeah, I just want to echo kind of what you said. I think it could have been very easy for them to kind of wrap it up and say this was a lost season, but I do see some shiny points here that they could still be okay.
Yep. And then for the other Wisconsin team, Green Bay, we need to see some shiny points from them that they could be okay because they get a really big opportunity. They played at home. They were back on the west side of town at the Rush Center. For Green Bay fans, there's a long-running debate about which building to play in. Should they play on campus at the Crest Center? Should they play, 20 minutes from campus, closer to where people actually live in Green Bay at the Rush Center, where there's bars and restaurants and Lambeau Field and all of that? And the decision was made this year to play 3 games at the Resch, and the rest of the season was at the Cress. Green Bay's attendance hasn't been terrible by any means, but it hasn't been great. They got their second largest crowd of the season. The only crowd that was larger for them this year was when they played Haskell. And Haskell is a Native American college. And in Green Bay, there's a large contingent of the Oneida tribe there, and so they did a good job of partnering to make sure that the Oneida tribe had plenty of tickets, and that Haskell came and played, and that was the biggest crowd of the season. But beyond that, the biggest crowd was for Friday night at Cleveland State, and those fans walked away disappointed. Greg, I'm going to read stats from you that I just find befuddling for the Phoenix. Against the Vikings, their shooting splits were 44, 48, and 88. And against Wright State, those splits were 46, 44, and 85. And they lost both games by 7 or more points. Like, that sucks. Like, there's some sort of defensive, breakdown happening that they could not, when they shot the ball that well, that they couldn't win in either of these games. That's frustrating. Did you catch anything from Green Bay this weekend?
Yeah, I think the game against Cleveland State was completely different than when they were in Cleveland a couple of weeks ago. That game was, I'm just going to say it was pretty much a slog the entire time, back and forth. Cleveland State definitely played down to the tempo Green Bay wanted to play. And I think Cleveland State said, okay, we got to come out and play a little bit quicker tempo. They put up 29 threes and made 16. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with Green Bay because you look at one game and it's kind of different issues as the other game. Against Wright State, the thing that stood out to me was the points off a turnover. Wright State had 11, Green Bay had 3, and Green Bay lost by 8. So that's the spread right there. But yeah, I mean, I I like what I see when I watch Green Bay. I just it's such a strange type of basketball right now for me to watch. Having watched Cleveland State all year, I think it's a little bit of a shock to the system when I watch them play.
Yeah, and Cleveland State did a way better job of not necessarily defending in a traditional sense. They just packed it in a little bit against Green Bay, and so it took away all that cutting action because there's 5 guys in the paint, and they said, okay, you gotta make threes, and Green Bay made threes. They just didn't defend the 3-point line. I mean, Green Bay, the issue that I see with the Phoenix is, they have a starting lineup where the tallest person is 6'6", and they're not exactly the most mobile team. They probably have 2 guys at 6'6" that can get above the rim on a consistent basis, and three guys or 2.5 guys that can't dunk. Not that dunking is everything, but just to give you the idea of like where the athleticism issue is. And so you're playing with your best skill and shooting lineup, but then just getting completely torched on the other end. And then they have like some brain lock things where guys are helping when they don't need to. They're just they're changing their defenses throughout the games, and sometimes that works for them, and sometimes it doesn't. It creates some confusion for some players. But Green Bay just doesn't have Preston Ringer had a mega game on Friday. He was 23 and 8. But beyond Preston, they don't have like a consistent guy that you can kind of like know for sure is going to give you something. O'Hara's kind of there, but O'Hara's not a great shooter, so he's got to be able to drive. But against Cleveland State, they're struggling to drive because of the zone defense that's being played for a while, being packed into the lane. So yeah, Green Bay is just kind of, if they can keep their style of basketball together and maybe get some more size appropriate and athletic players to go with it. Today against Wright State, they finally played Matawan Cicic, and he doesn't play on the perimeter, but he was able to pick and roll and get to the hoop and score a bunch of points down low, and he was a difference maker for them. So maybe they found something there that they can carry forward. They're going to play 2 games this week. They're going to go on the road to NKU, and then they're going to be at home against Detroit Mercy. So those are 2 games that they have to get, and hopefully the guys that are struggling in some regards will make a step forward. But the guys who hadn't been playing, like LeBron Thomas and Marouane Cicic, maybe those guys will, build on what they did today and give them something that Green Bay hasn't had of late. But yep, frustrating for the Phoenix. Go 0-2.
I think.
Did we find it?
Can I mention
Yeah,
one
go
thing?
ahead.
Something that you said jogged something in me. You were talking about Preston Redinger, and he had a monster game, and kind of there not being anyone else that you can rely on consistently. And I'm trying to choose my words here to not sound mean about this, but Green Bay is that one team in the league right now where every time I'm watching them play or looking at a box score, where I have to remind myself who's on the team. And we're pretty deep into the season, and I think I know for the most part, who the big players are on every team. And Green Bay is that one where every time I need to look at and remember who the guys are. And I don't know what that means. That's just me. And I'm sure I know the players right now, but it's just one of those teams where I'm not sure who the big guys are right now still.
The guys who look the best coming off the bus are not the guys who play. And I'm not saying they should play. It's just to your point of like they don't have a dude or like who is the dude. Every team usually has a dude, like just a dog, a badass. And Preston is that kind of player, but like he's also not. He doesn't look like he's going to be that kind of player. And so, not that looks are everything, but like when you're needing a bucket, like most teams could say, okay, we're going to give it to Donovan O'Day and he's going to get to the hoop and get us something. Or we're going to give it to Orlando Lovejoy and something good is going to happen. Or we're going to, Brody Robinson's going to make something happen. Green Bay doesn't necessarily consistently have that, which is what makes their style of basketball fun to watch, in that they are patient and diligent and usually find the right guys. But if they're not getting high level finishing in the lane from Allen and O'Hara, then everything else kind of becomes more difficult for them. So they don't have a true like bouncy horizon league guard that can shoot on the perimeter and drive to the hoop. A DeAndre Craig or a Corey Hadnot. They don't have anything like that. And so every game's a little bit of a wild card for the Phoenix. So anyway, did you figure out for D'Agostino what's going on with him, why he's out?
I have not. He got hurt in the game against Oakland. I'm sure if you go look at an article on Horizon Roundtable, I'm sure it says. I'm not able to figure it out right now with all the different stats I have in front of me.
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to read that article, but if you'd like to read the articles and support Horizon Roundtable, become a Patreon at patreon.com. All the hard work that all of our writers do would be greatly appreciated for anybody that could become a Patreon. I know that there are some incentives for referring additional friends to become Patreons and subscribers. Please do so and support all the work at the Horizon Roundtable. Greg, anything else that you'd like to share this week?
There is one other thing I want to share that's, it's Cleveland State specific, but not going on in the league right now. Tristan Enaruna signed a two-way deal with the Cavs, and he might play tonight. I believe we're recording this on Sunday, obviously. He might play. He's questionable because he's still technically with the G League charge. And Witten saw him play for the charge again on Friday. He's just been having a monster season since the regular season started for the G League. And the Cavs decided that he's kind of ready to go. And super excited to see him hopefully suit up for the Cavs soon.
That is a great way to close out. Awesome that anytime the Horizon League is getting guys in the league, it's awesome. And he was a really, really, really good Horizon League player. One that I'm, many times had the unfortunate, as a Phoenix fan, had to watch Phoenix fall short against him several times. But, I can still respect his game. So great for Tristan, great for the league, great for Cleveland State. Greg, thanks again for joining us this week and, bringing all of your analysis to this week's action. Much appreciated. That is this week's episode of the Zone Roundtable.